A pretty common question I get asked whenever I play Titanfall 2 is, why are you using Holopilot? And you know, to these people's credits, that is a perfectly valid question. The current landscape of Titanfall 2's multiplayer, you'd think there'd be only two choices of pilot. But I mean, there's a good reason why a vast majority of people run stim and grapple, because at the end of the day, they fully embody why most people are drawn to this game, the movement. When I first started out, I too, for the longest time, was a stim junkie. But in the end, I chose the Holopilot. So with that, I wanted to do a deep dive into why I love Holopilot and overall how it fits into Titanfall 2. Alright, before I get to the inevitable dunking on of this thing, I think it's pretty important to discuss why Holopilot is even worth picking in the first place. Now, by design, Holopilot is a relatively unique concept for an ability. With two charges, ideally, you're going to be throwing this ability out quite frequently with the hopes of course, fooling your enemies. And while its range of movement mimicry isn't as sophisticated as Mirage's, you can still make your Holo wall run, slide, and strafe. Kind of. Anyways, I'm going to be Captain Obvious for a second here, but the value of tricking your opponent with one of these decoys can often be the difference between life or death. Just think about it. If you manage to trick somebody into shooting your decoy, you're 1. Making them waste a bit of ammo, 2. Making them reveal their position, and most importantly, 3. Taking their attention away from the real threat, you. Now that last part is really great because you can twist that usage in so many ways in so many scenarios. For example, setting up defense in a hardpoint, throwing out a clone for recon, or distracting a Titan so that you can travel somewhere safely. And to think, you get 2 charges of this thing. This doesn't work against just people though. I love running Holopilot in Frontier Defense too, and while it may be better to run something like Grapple or Stim for that cross-map movement, Holopilot has the really useful function of forcing minions like Grunts and even Titans to start shooting at it instead of you. In modes like Attrition and Bounty Hunt, let's be honest, we've all gotten wrecked by the occasional grunt or two when they randomly decide to aim for once, and oh, Reapers! With the Holopilot, you're guaranteed to take no damage since those guys will be aiming for that sweet, sweet decoy. Well, unless you're up in their face. And remember how I was talking about how Holopilot has 2 charges? Well, if you combine that with arguably the most OP gun mod in the game, Tactical, you basically get your Holo back after each successful bamboozle. Start chaining those together, and you basically have infinite Holos. There are also some advanced tricks you can pull off, like satchel boosting and deploying your Holo to eat a melee hit for you, which unexpectedly makes Holopilot one of the more complex tactical abilities in the game if you really think about it. Now with what I've laid out, I think Holopilot is pretty strong. In fact, with complete bias from my end as a Holopilot main, I genuinely believe that Holopilot is one of the stronger tacticals in the game, or at least I think it's better than these two. But if you hadn't already guessed or known, Holopilot has always been under the stigma that it's weak, or even worse, completely useless. And so, I think it's only right that I try to tackle some of these arguments, and who knows, maybe I can convince you that Holopilot ain't that bad after all. With that in mind, say hi to Spyglass. He'll represent the common arguments for this hypothetical debate, and I'll try to be as unbiased for this section of the video as much as possible. So Spyglass, what do you have for us first?
It's too easy to figure out the decoy.
Jumping straight for the throat here, this is probably one of the most common reasons for why people bash on the effectiveness of Holopilot. In a vacuum, there are some pretty clear differences that you can point out, like the fact that Holos can't copy the camos of guns, and there's also the cold reality that a majority of the player base today have spent hundreds of hours fighting it out in the frontier. So you know, stupid gimmicky things like Holopilot aren't going to be nearly as effective. But what most people fail to realize is that you're not playing in a vacuum. Titanfall barrages you with different sounds, sights, colors, and considering this game is known for its speed, it can be pretty hard to react to everything accordingly. And so I think I can safely say that a good 99% of the player base operates on this principle. If it moves, shoot it. With the time to kill being so short, a lot of people can recognize that a single mistake can lead to death so often. Even if you're a big bad Gen 100, I know you're gonna shoot that decoy because what if you didn't, and that decoy turned out to actually be me? And even if you don't shoot the Holo, it's still doing its job of making you hesitate or look away. And more often than not, that's all the Holopilot needs to secure that kill. Also, people tend to overestimate themselves, me included.
Holopilot makes you play slower.
Now when it comes to this point, I think it's all about your preference. Because I get it, why would I stand around waiting for my Holos when I could be halfway across the map right now with something like Stim or Grapple? People need to understand though that movement isn't the end all be all of Titanfall, at least when it comes to fighting effectively, because at the end of the day, it's all about that reaction time and that aim. I even did a Titanfall Thursday that proves that point, where I roleplayed as a grunt with a 70 FOV and little to no movement, and I still managed to top score in almost all of those games. Besides that, Holo Pilot can absolutely be played with a fast playstyle if you use it in the right situations at the right time. And while it may be slower than Stim and Grapple, its gameplay loop is definitely not as slow as Cloak and AWOL.
Holo isn't really that useful.
I pretty much already dismantled this point when I talked about Holo's strengths, so if you somehow believe that Holo Pilot isn't up there in terms of usefulness, then I can only assume you just didn't listen to what I said, or I don't know, you're just dumb. Also, if you look at the whole picture, you can kind of see that the Holo Pilot can do the job of some of the other tacticals, albeit it's a little worse depending on how you look at it. You can recon areas like Pulse Blade with the trade-off of not having complete wall hacks, but the ability to send decoys way more frequently. You can have enemies and minions ignore you like Cloak, and you can avoid damage from yourself like Phase with the decoy. Okay, that one might be a stretch, but the point is, Holo is a lot more versatile than you think.
The other tacticals are just better.
Now, if I truly was that petty, I could sit here for at least an hour comparing all the scenarios, pros and cons, and subtle differences between each tactical, but here's a simpler answer for you. Every tactical has their uses. It just depends on what scenarios you encounter more often. For example, are you a movement guru that is super kill hungry? The obvious choice would be Stim or Grapple. Do you often find yourself in unfavorable positions? Use Phase Shift, so on and so forth. So while it may be true that yes, some tacticals may be better overall, it's not right to ignore what an ability can do, and as a result, downplay its effectiveness.
Holo Pilot requires more effort to pull off.
When it comes down to it, Holo Pilot is certainly up there when it comes to the skill curve. Between having to time your decoys, maintaining an appropriate distance, and etc., it can feel like you're putting in too much work/thought for that sweet payoff. But as a longtime player, I'd say that this is more of a positive. Think about it. Yeah, it's satisfying hitting that go to grapple or getting that sweet amped archer off on an AWOL, but those are a different type of satisfaction compared to getting that sweet bamboozle off. And can we talk about that? Bamboozle. That's such a good word. Cause there ain't nobody playing Cloak and be like, haha, you just got cloaked, yeah. Point is, the reward of satisfaction you get from being able to get that bamboozle off, I think makes up for the amount of effort you have to put in. All in all, I think I've made a decently good case for Holo Pilot, but what if they could be better? Rather though, I think a better question is, should they be better? I'll be honest, I think Holo Pilot is in a somewhat decent spot. While people don't use it 24/7, it has its uses and is especially strong in the hands of a good pilot. So really, I'm fine with the Holo Pilot staying the way it is. If I had to make some changes though, here are some wacky ideas. 1. Make the tactical gain a charge back on a bamboozle. Taking a note from Apex, I think this could be a nice little change that rewards successful bamboozles even more, and just having the decoys be more readily available is always going to be a plus. 2. Have bamboozles scan the shooter. I've heard this one being thrown around sometimes, and while I think it could definitely be a good change, I think it's kind of unnecessary. Having a scan removes the skill of determining where your opponent's shots came from, and this change would definitely diminish the value of running Pulse Blade. So again, I think I'd rather not have this change. And, you know, now that I'm writing this at 2:30 in the morning, a lot of these changes are things that Mirage can do in Apex. So, you know what? I think I'll just end the video here. Anyways, I hope this video shed some much needed light on Holo Pilot, and I hope I converted some of you guys into trying him out. Wink wink. If you want to find people to hang out with, or if you want to come and say hi, come join my Discord in the description. I also have networks on all platforms under the name Reach's Comrades, and I also have YouTube memberships up for grabs if you want to support me that way. That's going to be all from me though, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.